Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the show. And as you can tell, today we are joined by a very special guest indeed. Earlier this year, in February of 2023, uh, we had an amazing album that got released. The album's called Tides and Telescopes, and it's very much like a folk genre styled album, which is such a beautiful album. I think a couple of the songs kind of went crazy on social media, which is awesome. Today we are joined by McKane Davis. McKane, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Sam, for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
It is such an honor to have you on the show. As I kind of said to you briefly off camera, this album, I kind of heard it maybe mid to early this year. I think around April, May time. I'm sure I heard one of your songs called "The Turnaround," which is quite easily. It's I've got three like of my favorite songs from the album. "The Turnaround's" up there as one of them. It kind of went a lot on social media with people doing it in montages, and that's kind of how I first got introduced to you. So I just really love to kind of get to talk to you about the creative process of your album.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to share what I can. Don't know if it'll be
Awesome.
inspiring or not, but I'll share it with you. Yeah.
No, do you know anything? I think as well, sometimes with these, whether it's inspiring, it's just a cool concept for people like myself to be able to kind of hear your thought processes on creating songs or just in general, really, on music itself. I always think it's really interesting to share a lot of music ideas.
Great.
But we'll start with kind of the earlier time. So what is your early sort of background with music?
Man, going back, going way back, I grew up in a house where music was always played. My dad played guitar. My mom was very into music, so it was around a lot and picked up a guitar. It was in, middle school around there, and my dad wouldn't let me touch his nice guitar. He gave me his old beat up guitar and said, "You can practice on that one," and just fell in love with the instrument. That's kind of where I started, and from the very beginning, as long as I can remember, I wanted to learn guitar so I could write songs. Just kind of this interesting thing. I don't even remember why or what was the catalyst necessarily, but I just wanted to write songs, and then was able to do some of that in different groups and bands through high school and college. Got away from it after, life took hold. I, got married, multiple kids and job, and life sort of pulled me away. Um, about probably, I think it's been about 8 years, 9 years ago, founded a group called Cinematic Pop with a good friend of mine who's just a phenomenal musician and composer named Rob Gardner, and my brother. So the three of us founded that, and and that did really well. I don't know if you found your way to that music too, in when you were kind of researching or found me initially. Did you hear of that, Sam? The Cinematic
I've
Pop
heard I've seen on your website you've linked it. I haven't had the opportunity to listen to any yet.
is very different than this. It's and I took a producer slash songwriter role in that. I don't do the composing, but it's classical instruments, so an orchestra and choir and soloists doing pop music and rock music and stuff. So very different than the folk stuff that is my roots. But I was not really very creative in that group, and started writing about a year ago. And maybe we'll get more into sort of the catalyst. Not writing, I started recording, released the album a year ago almost, and started writing a couple years ago. And maybe we'll get more into kind of what the catalyst was for that. But came back to my first love, which is acoustic guitar, folk music, and just felt a lot of joy. And it's just been great to get back in touch with that part of me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really refreshing to kind of get an opportunity to talk to people about folk music in particular, because I find it, just from my personal opinion, there's something about the sound that just feels so natural and raw and authentic. And I think that's probably why I really love the genre of music. But there's not many people, for me anyway, I get to really chat to about. So it's really cool. Did you used to listen to a lot of folk sort of growing up, or what was your style that you kind of listened to?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I didn't know it was called folk music back then, but I just always gravitated towards the acoustic guitar. So like Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul and
Yeah.
Mary, that type of stuff. My dad's old records, I always gravitated to the acoustic stuff. Um, and I think that there's something, like you said, there's something that is very authentic and natural about it. It's just so stripped down, and I feel like folk songs can live with just a guitar and one vocal and be really powerful and beautiful. And there's something about that that drew me in as a kid, and I didn't even know to call it folk music or
Mm.
whatever. It was I was sitting in the movie theater several years ago when the movie Peanut Butter Falcon came out. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's a
I've
great,
heard it. I do.
okay, great movie. The soundtrack's amazing, and it's just full of this really awesome indie folk, kind of where folk has arrived after many years. And I was sitting in the theater and I like reached and grabbed my wife's hand and I was like, what is this music? And it was Gregory Alan Isakov's song, the Stable Song is in a scene there. And the whole soundtrack's phenomenal, but that song particularly like really grabbed me, and both my wife and I were like, this is amazing. And so, that sort of started on a journey of me discovering a bunch of just really beautiful music from, Gregory Alan Isakov and other artists like him, and just really immersed myself in it after that.
Wow, it's kind of crazy, really, how even as far back as a lot of people can remember, like myself, again, I like folk, I like country as well, and I guess for me with country music, that was the first discovery that I had with the first time I connected and thought, I love this sound, I love this song and this style. But it's
Mm.
like you said, I didn't know that it was country. I didn't even know, like over here in the UK, country, especially back then, there wasn't many people that really listened to it. I mean, you had the odd songs. I never realized it was different until I kind of went to school and everyone was like, "What are you listening to?" And it took a long time for me to understand that, oh, it's just a completely different subgenre. But folk, yeah, like you said, folk for me is something that it's just such a beautiful and natural thing. Um, if it doesn't have to necessarily be with folk music, but is there any kind of other album or anything that really gravitates you to in maybe in the modern day that really you're liking at the moment?
Oh man. What am I listening to? Well, I tend to gravitate towards music where the lyrics are meaningful. Um,
Yeah,
and then, and obviously the song and the melody and instrumentation, all that stuff's really important. But for whatever reason, I just immediately gravitate towards lyrics. Um, some of the stuff I've been listening to lately, well, Gregory Alan Isakov, I'll mention him again, came out with an album recently called Appaloosa Bones that's beautiful. I've been listening to that quite a bit. The Lumineers, I find myself going back to
okay, yeah,
regularly. There's a guy named Ken Yates who has some beautiful, he's a little bit under the radar here in the US. He's from Canada, but he's got some beautiful stuff that he's released recently. Just a really great songwriter. Again, his lyrics are great, melodies are great. Um, I tend to listen to this style of music because I love it so much. So I'm really immersed in that. So I've got a whole playlist of stuff, but those are the ones that pop into mind.
yeah.
I should
Awesome.
share my
Wow.
playlist with you, right?
Do you know what? I would love for you to share your playlist with me. That would be so cool. That'd be awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I'll do that.
So obviously, naturally, I went over to your webpage, which I'll leave all of your links at the top of the description to your social medias, web pages, Spotify, all these things, because I think people need to check you out a lot more. Um, I know kind of there's a songwriting side to you as well as a singing and performing side. Um, do you feel yourself that you naturally sway more towards one or the other, or do you kind of love both of them in the same manner?
Uh, I definitely prefer the songwriting and recording process. I'm way more comfortable in that sphere, even though I performed with groups and bands when I was younger. There is a like I just have a lot of anxiety when I think about performing, honestly.
Yeah,
It's something that I want to get over, and it's you know, for lack of a better metaphor, a mountain that I need to climb. So I'll be doing that this coming year, getting out and performing, but it makes me uncomfortable, and I don't like doing things that make me uncomfortable. So yeah, that's pretty much the answer to that. I much prefer the writing process and
yeah.
the recording I love. Yeah.
No, do you know what? I can completely resonate with that, and honestly think a lot of people listening to this can definitely assign to that as well. Not just with musicians, but I interview actors as well. And the one thing I can never understand for myself is how they go onto a stage and just perform in front of however many people and just do it so like naturally. And it's the same with music. To myself, I mean, I'm really comfortable doing this. I'm in my box and this is kind of what I like to do. But the idea of doing it in front of people, it is hard. But I think for you, you will get so much support from people because your music is so beautiful to listen to online. Like I can only imagine what that must be like in a live setting. So I really hope that that's something that you can kind of start to build piece by piece in the coming year.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You're giving me motivation to keep working on it. In fact, today I have time scheduled to like rehearse and practice doing it. I get just very nervous, and
Yeah,
even in like a small group, because we'll have friends or people around and they're like, "Hey, play that song," and I'll pull it out and I find my heart starts to beat and I'm like, "Why am I doing this?" I performed a lot when I was younger, and I think I just got comfortable not doing it maybe, and need to flex that muscle and get through it. But yeah, thanks for those comments. I'm looking forward to getting through this and having the
yeah,
experience, because I feel like I'll grow from it. But it's something that I definitely need to
yeah.
work on.
Awesome, for sure. I mean, the thing is, you can always start small, right? I mean, you could start doing it like live streams and that kind of thing as well. It doesn't always have to be out in public person. Sometimes just having you seeing like a camera like this, and there could be hundreds of people watching, but because you don't physically see them, like it kind of maybe helps a little bit. That'd be something that'd be awesome to see.
That's a really cool idea. Yeah, and then I could reach people who aren't here where I'm at
Yeah,
without travel. That's a great idea. Yeah.
yeah. I also have to compliment, I know it's a bit random midway through, but I absolutely love your background and guitars. It's really awesome to see. Do you have a particular favorite one, or do you just like all of them?
Let me see. Probably this one. Um, I have more ones that have more history, it's
Yeah.
personal history with me, like there's a Taylor back there that's kind of covered that's been with me for like 20 plus years. But
Wow.
this one, it's a Martin, and back in the day, I guess Martin, they got a lot of their wood, the mahogany wood from Belize. And I hope I'm telling this story right, but they got a lot of their wood from Belize, and they would fell these trees, and then they would put them on the river and try and, they would take them up the river, down the river, whatever, in Belize,
Wow.
and then put them on ships and bring them back to the US. Well, a percentage of those logs sunk in the river, and it was too hard to get them out. So they just left them there from back in like the 1950s or something, or 60s. And and again, I might have the decades wrong here, but it's been, 40, 50 years, something like that. And just in recent years, Martin went back down and started taking those logs out. So they've been sitting in a river for 50 years. So it's really old wood that has been like soaked in water. And somehow they take them out and they dry them and make guitars out of them. So it's called sinker mahogany, and this guitar is made out of that, and it just sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it when I played it the first time. I'm like, what is happening? It's just this really cool resonant sound that I hadn't heard before. So that's probably my favorite, that has the most interesting story about it, I guess.
Oh, for sure. That's such a cool story. That's something that's cool. That's something you could always like, especially tell your kids as well. Like, that's something you could be like, look at the piece of history that we have right here. 'Cause that's what it is. It's just history as well.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, totally. Yeah, this one will show up a lot on my next record that I'll record this coming year. This one's going to be all over that. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. That's amazing. So obviously we'll have to get into the album release, Tides and Telescopes. Um, you know, as I've said to you off camera, and briefly on camera, this is no bias because we're talking. I mean, I reached out to you because there's something about this album, and I think again it's the raw authenticity of how it feels. Um, I've had this album on repeat so often in the house, and just so often, even if I'm at work or I'm out and about, this album it just keeps playing in my head. Um, I've fallen so in love with the album, and I'd really like to get to talk to you about your creative process behind it, and maybe if you have any stories behind it. So the first thing I'd like to ask is, uh, how did you come up with the name Tides and Telescopes?
Um, I feel like naming albums, I'll do a little tangent, is really hard because you're like trying
Yeah,
to encompass everything that is part of this album, all the songs, and something that matches all of it. And this one, the songs, like, there's a lot about ocean, tides, that's one theme that emerged in these songs. And the other one is like looking beyond, uh, you know, out to space or the stars or the moon. And when I kind of looked at the songs as a whole, I was like, well, there's this piece about the ocean and there's this piece about the stars and looking beyond. And I loved the alliteration of the two. So it just sort of kind of came together because of the alliteration. But that's really, those two themes were kind of the most prominent on the album.
yeah, awesome. And again, like you said, it's how important it is because you could put all this time and work into these songs, but that the album title of the art cover obviously is very important too, but the title has to very fit in and tie in with the songs because if it's something completely polar opposite, it can kind of throw people and deter them a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think the flow of the albums in each song, I think it fits really well. Um, so when it came to the album, what was was there a particular song you had already had and written which kind of inspired the album, or did you already have these songs in collection to put them together?
Okay, great question. So the catalyst that got me back into music was I had a routine surgery that went sideways on me somehow. We still don't know what happened, but I ended up in severe chronic pain. That led to just and when I used to hear people say chronic pain, and I was like, oh, they have like a headache that lasts for a long time. And this was like something else entirely. It was just constant suffering. And that really took a toll on me mentally, emotionally. And my wife was the one who first suggested I get back into songwriting. She's like, I think you need something to just help pull you out, like something you can look forward to, something you can be creative with. And she really pushed me to start writing again. And I was a bit resistant at first. And once I kind of sat down and started working on it, the first song that I wrote was called The Tide. And it's really autobiographical about that experience of going through really intense suffering and what that's like. And so that was the first song that I wrote for the album. And when I finished it, played it for my wife, she's like, "Oh my gosh, you have to record this." The I didn't really have a goal of recording. It was just let's just write again, like let's just get something that brings me some joy. Um, and so that was the first song, and she's like, "You're gonna have to record this." And as I kept writing and recording more, she was very insistent that I record, and so that was the first song and the kind of catalyst that started it all.
Wow, it's always horrible to hear about these stories that people go through and suffer through a lot. And it's very, to me again, and I think a lot of people can kind of resonate with this, is it is very inspiring to have see people that are going through something like yourself and many other things that people go through in day-to-day life. And you can turn it into something not only that helps you, but can really inspire and share with a lot of people as well. Um, yeah, I think that's such and it sounds like your wife is a very big influence with you as well, which is awesome.
She is. I think on my website I call her my co-pilot and co-writer. She was so insistent on me doing it, and then she's been so supportive through the whole process. And I can play songs for her, and she'll never tell me that's garbage, like
Yeah.
she'll never tell me it's bad, but I can tell. Like she'll either say that's really good or she'll say that's amazing, I love it. And I know if she just says that's really good, that means it's probably garbage. But she's very supportive. You probably recognize there's references to her on the album and our friendship and stuff. But yeah, she's as much a part of this as I am. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. So throughout the album, as I said, I kind of grew up making sure. I actually worked with a guy that's so heavily into music. I mean, you can ask him any question about anything, and he'll know a reference to it. And one thing he always taught me was, if you like a song, you have to listen to the full album. So that's kind of, I've always carried that philosophy with me, because I used to be very guilty of just listening to a song. As I said, the first song I discovered from you was The Turnaround, which again is one of my favorite songs. But I used to be very guilty of just listening to that song, and that was it. And I had that in the back of my head thinking I have to listen to the rest of this album. And I'm so glad I did, because there were so many other songs off your album that I loved. Two in particular that spring to my mind was Wings and Ready as well as obviously The Turnaround. Um, and any three of those songs, what was kind of the inspiration, or what was the process like for you to kind of create those songs?
So Wings, I think that was actually the second song that I wrote for the album. And that one is about somebody really close to me. So I won't talk about her identity just because of the nature of the situation, but very biographical, I guess you could say, but really accurate depiction of what she went through leaving an abusive relationship. And I loved the way that some of those phrases came together in that one. We talk about lyrics. Sometimes I get to the end of the songwriting process and there's even like Easter eggs in there for me. And that was kind of it for me, where on second, third reading of the lyrics or whatever, after finishing it, I was like, oh, there's like a little piece here that works in a way that I didn't think of it. But that one's about somebody close to me. Most of the songs are about somebody close to me or about something that I've experienced. So that was kind of the catalyst for Wings. Um, and then Ready, uh, bit autobiographical. Kind of that one is more of a combination of um, some a story of a friend, something that I went through, and then something that I read in a book, actually. And that song, Ready, almost didn't make the record until I played it. I wasn't planning on recording it, and I played it for a couple of people, and they're like, that might be your best song. I was like, oh, I wasn't even gonna use it on the album. They're like, no, you have to record that. Um, the the book it's a scene in a book called The Choice, and I wish I could remember the author off the top of my head. I'll have to look that up. But basically, she was a Holocaust survivor, and she became a therapist. And there was a young man who they assigned to her to do therapy with, and she was this renowned therapist who could handle anybody. And this young man was just so angry about life, and he came in and sat, and he didn't realize that she was Jewish or that she was a Holocaust survivor, and he just went on this long rant about how he wanted to kill the Jews and how he hated this group and that group. And she talks about how she had to calm herself in that moment, and she turns to him and she talks to him and tries to explain and calm him down, and she has a breakthrough with him. And that was kind of this moment where I realized that these turns, like when somebody has an interaction, lots of these happen without any fanfare or you know, the song says, nobody's saying no hallelujah. And it's like, yeah, that, you know, these moments that actually change people's lives, there's no fanfare for, but they change the trajectory of people's lives for the better. And it's very rare that that becomes a movie or a moment that people recognize or anything. And I've had those in my life where somebody has made an impact on me and it totally changed the trajectory of my life for the better. So that's kind of the theme of that song.
That's awesome. You know, I kind of love that a lot of these things are kind of obviously uh you're taking bits from your personal life and people that you know and care about. Um, but I also love the fact that, you know, it's come from a place where it's changing people's kind of perceptions on things as well, which I think that's a really awesome idea. Um, so whilst you were, it could have been maybe during a song or maybe even constructing the album itself. Were there any challenges in particular that you maybe faced during the album, or did it all just kind of happen and flow naturally?
Um, Probably the biggest challenge that I faced was self-doubt, this feeling of sort of, they talk about imposter syndrome. Definitely had
Yeah,
that. Um, when I when I thought about recording the album, it originally was like, well, I'm just going to record it here at my house and just release it to friends. And again, my wife was very insistent. She's like, no, like these are really good songs. You need to record them in the best way that you can. Find the best people to help you. So I wouldn't say that it was a challenge to find the best people, but it was like this bit of self-doubt that I had to get over to reach out to the producer that I really wanted to work with and to the musicians who I loved that I wanted to work with. That was probably the biggest challenge for me, more of a mental than a logistical one.
yeah. Do you know what? I completely understand and get that, because it's something where it's kind of like you've taken it an idea and shared it, as you said, with your wife and maybe even with friends that you kind of you're in a circle, and then this time you're kind of having to put yourself out there and open up and be like just hoping that there's like a good reception. So I can kind of completely understand that. And it's really good job that you did. What was Were you kind of surprised about the kind of the reaction that people have had to some of your songs and albums?
Very. And I think part of that comes back to like the self-doubt or imposter syndrome. I had very, very low expectations of what would happen with the music when I put it out there. I think I told a friend, I'm like, if I can reach 1,000 streams on one of these songs, like that would be amazing. So to get responses from people has been really neat. And I think honestly, probably the neatest part for me is the people who reach out without being prompted and say, hey, your music uplifted me or impacted me or caused me to think about this situation in a new way. Um, I saw a comment on, there's a song called Outstretch Arms that's about the relationship between parents and children. And I've got 4 kids of my own, so this is like near and dear to me. But this woman wrote, she said, I'm using this song to heal from childhood trauma, and it's going to make me a great parent one day. And I was like, how cool is that? You know, like that this music touched her in a way that she's using it to heal and to like move on to something that she wanted to do but had been resisting because of, you know, the trauma that she had experienced from a parent in her life. And I was like, that's really cool. So it's that type of stuff that has surprised me the most and also been by far the most rewarding, like the individual that will reach out and tell me it impacted them. That's been cool.
Yeah, you know, I love that people like there's this built up feeling that they kind of, whether it's private message or it's a social media share. I love the fact that there's something inside them that feels like they need to thank you, kind of, because it's something that like a song that you write, for example, can help people through some of the darkest times of their lives or a struggle they have every single day. So what you contribute and what you're like providing to the public and everyone is like something that really helps them throughout, you know, days, weeks, months, years. So I feel like there's a lot of people that need to kind of that feeling to show their appreciation. And I think that's a really cool thing. And I think people like yourself need to know like how much your music really does inspire and help people. It's an amazing thing.
Well, it was really it was so cool to get the messages from people and say like this music is making a difference and it is impacting them. And I got some, direct messages, as you said, and it actually inspired me when these people reached out to me. I'm like, hey, there's people who inspired me to like go on this journey and write, and I'm going to reach out to them. So there was I mentioned him earlier, Ken Yates, just this great songwriter. So after getting a message from somebody to me about my music, I'm like, I need to go out to Ken Yates and tell him how much his music impacted me. So I did that, and he responded. He's like, "How cool to get this message out of the blue!" And I'm like, that it made so much of a difference to me to keep writing and want to keep doing this. And I'm like, I want to encourage him to keep doing this because he impacted me. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. That's amazing. So and this is actually kind of ties into the next bit really. Um, so in terms of like for me, as I mentioned to you before, I found your a lot of your music, as well as think a lot of people do now through social media posts. Um, how in how do you feel that like, the internet and social media has heavily impacted kind of the music industry?
I think it's a like with most things, there's like a pros and cons of it. Um, for me, I feel like the pros outweigh the cons, at least for me as an artist, because I can reach people that I would never have been able to without the help of a label 20 years ago or 25 years
Yeah,
ago. And I don't have to, I can make this music without having to make it a full-time job and try and raise a family on it at this stage in my life. And maybe that'll happen at some point, but I don't have the pressure of that. So I can say what I want to say in the music and not worry about it, blowing up and reaching the Billboard top 100 or whatever. There's a certain freedom that comes with the distribution through the internet where, I can just focus on the creative part of it and create what I want and then put it out in the world, and people will find it. So I think that's the good side. There are definitely downsides to it. And you talked about social media. I'm not a huge fan of social media in general. Like I feel like there's a lot of negative. Positive is that positive stuff also spreads. So, and I've been the recipient of that as people have spread my music on social media. So it's hard for me to discount it entirely when I've been the beneficiary of it. Um, but I think for me, I couldn't have done this without the role of social media and the internet in spreading the word about the music for sure.
yeah. I'm gonna put you on the spot with this question. So if you
Okay.
can't answer it, it's cool. Out of all the songs on, I'll refer to Tides and Telescopes. Do you have one particular, I can't say favorite because it must be very hard to say favorite, but is there one song that really sticks out to you more? Or do you kind of treat all of the songs the same?
Definitely not all the same. Um, Interestingly, when I wrote all the songs for it and was going into the studio to record them, I had my ones that I thought would have a greater chance of resonating with people. I think I'm kind of a bad judge of that in some ways because the ones that I liked, haven't gotten as much um, love, I guess. Not in all cases, but in general, that kind of happened to me, which I think is maybe common for artists. The one that maybe stands out to me is called Eye of the Universe, because has seemed to resonate with so many other people. And you know, for people watching this, some of the people will be fans of just that song. By the way, I loved what you said about listening to the whole album. I've made a mental note of that because I've got songs in my playlist where I'm like, I have not taken that initiative to go listen to the whole album from many of these artists that I like a song from. So I've got some homework to do. Um, but kind of jumping back into that song, it was inspired by a video game of all things called Outer Wilds, and it's this just beautiful video game. I'm not much of a gamer, but when I was going through some of this chronic pain, my brother-in-law showed up with this game, and he's like, I think he knew I needed some joy in my life, and he's like, "We're gonna play this together." And so we started playing it together, and then my two older sons joined, and then my younger kids and my wife, and so we would play it together as a team essentially. And we did this like once or twice a week over the course of a couple months until we beat the game. And or I guess you wouldn't even say beat, it's like complete the game. But the payoff at the end of this game is just really beautiful. I won't do any spoiler alerts here. But it's really beautiful. And so that was kind of the inspiration for this song. And I talked earlier about how I'll kind of take something from somebody else's experience and merge it with my own. So it's the story of the protagonist of the video game, but it's also my story kind of interweaved. And that has seemed to really resonate with people. And that was one when I finished the song, I was like, I think this is good, and I think it's going to resonate with people, and it has. So I think that one's kind of special in that way too. And that's been a fun song to get out there and have people who experience the game the way that I did, and the ending of the game in the way that I did, where it was almost kind of a spiritual experience. They're listening to this song going, hey, there's somebody else out there who had that experience and is expressing it through this song. So that's been fun.
Oh, wow, that's so cool. Yeah, I know whenever you search your name, uh, that is, I would probably say that's the first song that very much appears, whether it's on Google, social media, any posts, and it is a beautiful song, and that's really cool as well. I actually really love you told the story about the video game because, again, it kind of shows like inspiration can kind of come out of anywhere. I mean, I'll be honest, if I was listening to that song, and I know obviously part of it is for your personal experiences too, but like the concept that inspiration could come from this beautiful game was just wouldn't even conceive that that was a possibility. So that's really cool. Yeah, with listening to the full album, to be honest, it wasn't something that I myself decided to do. It was something, like I said, I worked with this guy who worked in music for 30 plus years, and it was like he drilled it into me every single day at work that you must listen to the album. And if I was like, oh, I will, he'd play it out loud all the way through. And I've just kind of carried that with me. And I'm so happy I did because I found all these beautiful songs off your album that I just love, absolutely love.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it to me because, like I said, I've got some homework, and there are some times when I'll do that, but it's just random. And so, this idea of like finding something you love and then going and listening to more of the catalog or more of the album, I just love that. So, hopefully, people who are listening to this will take that as a takeaway too, and listen to more albums. And probably more important now than ever with the age of streaming and playlists and stuff, you can find one song and just play that song over and over and love it without necessarily giving the rest of the album or catalog a listen. Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Awesome, no problem. Um, so for yourself, again, I kind of, I guess for people to get to know you as a person more, I guess kind of a side question is, aside from your own songs, do you have like a go-to song that if you were whether in yourself in the car or in the shower or cooking or doing whatever you want to do, is there like one song that you just find your go-to song to sing or listen to?
It I definitely have those songs, but they tend to change every couple of weeks or so. What am I listening to now? Let me pull up my um there's a guy named Noah Kahn who I've gotten into. He's got some really beautiful songs. So a couple of his have been that for me. I'll tell you what I've been listening to lately. I'm just pulling up my history here. Um, the there's a group called Bears Den and a song called Agape from that I've been listening to over and over. Um, there's a guy named Zach Bryan. He's actually quite popular, kind of in the country slash indie
Hmm.
folk kind of genre. There's a couple of his that I've been listening to lately, but it really tends to shift for me. About I'll find something I love, and then I'll go back to it multiple times and listen to it and kind of try and dissect it. Part of it as a listener consumer, but also as a songwriter, like understanding how they put the song together and how they engineered it is always interesting to me too. Sorry, I don't have
Yeah.
a better answer for you. Yeah,
No, no, that's awesome because again, it's you're sharing music that people maybe have never heard, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, you mentioning that now that I know somebody listening to this will be sat on Spotify or iTunes, they'll be scrolling through trying to find the song. So I love that. Um, do you attend or ever go to kind of much like live music or concerts and things?
I have started to. I got away from it for years, and just in the last couple years I've started, and it's really this style of music that I just love. Like it's just I just find it so beautiful. Um, my wife and I went with her brother and her mother to a Gregory Alan Isakov show at a nearby town a couple of years ago. It's kind of actually during the pandemic. It was right when people were starting to play again. And so we got tickets to that show and we were on the third row, and it was just mind-blowingly good and just amazing. And I was like, I miss this part of my life of like going and experiencing live music. And so we've gone to multiple shows since then of his and of other artists. But it tends to be kind of this genre that I really like to experience live too.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm really hoping there will be a day where I'll be able to get to see you perform live. That's like a big goal of mine to see. Do you feel like going to a concert really helps inspire you to perform live in front of people?
Yes, definitely inspires me to want to do it. There's something in me when I see that I'm like, it would be cool to be the one helping to create that experience for others. Um, because like what that band does, the Gregory Alan Isakov band, what they do live is just so beautiful that it like transcends time, and you're just the concert ends and you're like, whoa, where am I? Sort of thing. It's like that cool. So to be on the opposite side of that and helping other people to have that experience where they're like immersed in the music and they have an emotional or just this resonant experience with music, that draws me. And I think that's probably what's driving me to want to like get over this fear and anxiety of performing, and is that desire to be part of that experience for people and help them to have that experience that I've had with other musicians.
Yeah, and I want to thank you as well for sharing about, um, you know, like like a reality of having struggling to the ability to perform live, because I think what I think's really cool that you share this with us is because I know, and I know again with other viewers that watch this who follow some of the acting who come over to this one too. It happens with all kind of live performance. Um, and it's so rare to have somebody that will just be honest and say that they struggle to perform live. Um, and I really just want to thank you for sharing that with people because I think, it's a very common thing. And I mean, I couldn't perform live. I couldn't do anything live because it needs to become like a bit more talked about, I feel, because a lot of people just assume that, oh, they must perform in front of hundreds of thousands of people or tens of thousands of people. But it isn't always that easy. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh yeah. Well, it's definitely the truth. It's like It's something that I
Yeah.
want to do. There's part of me that really wants to do it, and there's the other part that is just, it's uncomfortable, and so pushing through that discomfort is hard, and that's probably true with so many things in life where they are rewarding when you push through and you do something that you didn't think you could do or that was gonna be really hard, and, that's been true with me throughout my life is just, pushing myself, doing something that's difficult, um, and, I think part of it too for me is, like, um, worrying about what other people think has been a big theme in my life, um, and I've really started to get over that in the last year and a half, to 2 years, and it took me way too long. So if I can save somebody some steps who's listening to this, like, life is not about what other people think about you. It's about what you can give to them, and it just took me so long to learn that, and so now at this stage in my life, I'm like, I want I don't want that to be part of me, and I think that's part of this drive to, like, perform live because I think that anxiety comes from, like, what are people gonna think if I screw up, or what if my performance is bad, and, all those that chatter in the back of our minds,
Hmm.
um, but if I can get over that, if we can get over that, if anyone can get over that chatter about, like, what are people thinking about me, or what's going on in their minds, like, that's really none of our business, like, we spend so much energy I mean, I spent so much energy in my life worrying about that, and, it just ultimately, it's just a fruitless experiment to worry about that kind of stuff, and life is just so much more joyful if we just focus on what other people can receive and what we can give to them, and creating something good in the world than, all this chatter in our mind about what people are thinking about us. Sorry, I'm getting a little philosophical here, but
No, it's awesome. It's amazing you do, and well, an example of an artist that really struggled was Chris Stapleton. I know that he used to do a lot of songwriting for years and years and years, and but he would, naturally, certain songs suit other artists more than others, so he would hand out his songs. But I remember there was a an interview where his wife said that it was also he didn't believe his voice was good enough for people, and then he released an album, and now he's become one of, if not arguably, one of the biggest country artists in the world today.
it's
So
phenomenal. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Wow.
yeah, so
Oh,
if
I can totally relate to that. Yeah.
yeah, because I remember hearing him first, and I was like, I always heard him sing a lot of songs. Like, on there's loads of videos on YouTube of him singing kind of songs, which I just assumed were covers, but actually they're his songs that he gave them to other artists. Um,
Oh,
and I was like, and then you hear his voice, and I'm like, how can you conceive that your voice is not good enough? But he never believed that he didn't he didn't feel like his image fitted. He didn't feel like his voice was really good enough for people. People wouldn't like it. And then I think it's one of the biggest selling debut albums in country history, which is
amazing.
mental.
Amazing. Oh, I didn't know that about him. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. Yeah, on so many levels. I've written stuff for other groups and people over the last decade and never for myself until recently. Same sort of thing. I'm like, well, my expectations are very low for who's going to want to listen to this and who will end up listening to it. Um, and we were just finishing up in the studio recording the album, and the producer, his name's Andrew Berlin, just a gem of a human being. I love him. He is amazing. And we finished, it was the last day, and he was like, that was fun. And he's like, this was such a fun record to work on. You have such a good voice. And I was like, really? Like I do not feel that way. Like, I'm glad you can make me sound good. And he was sort of taken aback. He's like, "What are you talking about?" But it's just that, we get in our own heads about things and we tell ourselves stories about, what people are gonna think about us. I did not realize that about Chris Stapleton. That
Yeah.
is super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very normal thing, but again, as somebody who follows your music, and I see a lot of posts about it because, especially doing research before this, I kind of really wanted to get like a wide scope of opinions on your music. Like, you know, scrolling through posts and things, and the amount of like positivity there is from your songs and albums, like there's just this feeling that I think that you're gonna have like this fan base now that are just gonna support you, whether you release an album, do a live stream, go perform live. I feel like your music's just gonna connect with people in a way that's not just a hit Billboard song that's a one-off that people like to listen to. I think people like to follow your story and your, as I said, the full album. And there is this just feeling I feel with you that that's very much a possibility.
Well, that'd be wonderful. Nothing would make me happier than that to be the case, you know, like just to have an impact on people would be amazing. So, and just, you know, hearing you talk and the impact it's had on you is just so rewarding. And yeah, I mean, that's all that I could hope for, is that people listen to the music, it impacts them, it uplifts them, it inspires them, because that makes it all worth it.
Yeah. And I know the Tides and Telescopes, I know it was February this year. So we've had a good, is it 9 months?
Yeah,
About 9 months.
just long enough to
Um,
make a baby. 9 months, yes.
um, so, and it might be a bit early because I know people take time. Is there a kind of a time scope on maybe another single or another album, or like you in the works and doing anything now?
Yes. After recording the last album, took like a couple months of not really writing a lot because I was focused on finishing and everything and getting this out there. But I've been writing again. I have, I think I have like 8 or 9 songs that I think will make it onto the next record, and then I have studio time booked for April and June. So I anticipate the album will be finished around June or July, and it'll be released late 2024. So probably October, November 2024. So it'll be a full album. There's something about albums for me that I love. I know that like all of the marketing gurus and everything that do music say to release singles and just trickle them out over time, but there's just something special for me about albums, so that's kind of the art form that I enjoy, and so I've just stuck with that. So I'll do a full length album again end of next year. Yeah,
That's so awesome. I really look forward to that. And again, when it comes to releasing singles albums, even if you decide to take the change and release singles maybe every couple of weeks or however they normally do it, as long as that's something that you feel is natural to you, whether it's a full album or singles, I think that's what people get that feeling for. So
yeah,
as long as you do what you feel is natural, then the people will be happy for sure.
yeah. I think there's wisdom in that for sure. And so far, it's felt right to do albums, and
Yeah.
maybe it'll continue, or maybe it'll be like doing singles or collaborations or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Actually, that's a quick question. I know we're running along for time, and I don't want to hold you up too much longer. Um, Something else you forgot to ask: if you had to collaborate or could collaborate with one person, who would that be?
I already did it actually. So there's a guy named Steve Varney. His fingerprints are all over the album. He is a phenomenal musician. I talked about Gregory Alan Isakov. He is a keys player, so piano, guitarist, and banjo player in Gregory Alan Isakov's band. I'm such a fan of his. He's also just an amazing human being, just phenomenal. Just a kind human being, and funny and smart, and an amazing musician. So I was able to collaborate with him on the album, and it's like that is all I could have ever asked for. Honestly, like he is phenomenal. So that I already got to do it. I already got to collaborate with the guy I would love to collaborate with. So, and I think I'm going to get him to collaborate again on this next album, which is super exciting for me too.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. You got to kind of do that. That's the one big person if you could collaborate with. That's cool. That's
for
so awesome
sure.
because a lot of people really want to do that and hope one day it's possible. So that's awesome you got to live that experience.
I know, it's such a blessing. Yeah, and he's amazing. Yeah.
So McCain, if you could speak to people that love singles, your album, your music in general, if you could have kind of a message for those people, what would that be?
Man, just gratitude, I think, just a gratitude that they've taken the time to listen to it. Um, it's made it so rewarding for me, and it's given me the inspiration to keep writing. So the people who have listened have given me feedback, have given me the wind in my sails to keep doing this, and it just brings me a lot of joy. So yeah, just total gratitude and thanks to them for listening and taking the time to spend part of their life listening to the creation that I worked on.
You know, again, I really want to thank you for taking time out of your day to speak to us. I'm going to make sure that all your links to your social medias, your website, the albums, I'll make sure that's all linked at the very top of the description. So anyone listening or watching to this can just click the links and it'll kind of take you to where you want to go to. We cannot wait to see the album that comes out, hopefully the end of next year. It's been awesome talking to you. Thank you so much.
Sam, thank you. I will say you have such a good, I don't know if bedside manner is the right term, but like such a good way of interviewing. I went and watched several of your interviews before we did this, and you just have a way of connecting with people that's so disarming. I just loved it. Side note, I was like watching, you've interviewed a lot of people who have appeared in scary movies. And I'm like watching these and I'm like, these people are so cool. And they're also responsible for a lot of nightmares in my
I
youth,
know, I know,
but they're such
I
cool
know.
people.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just want to tell you, you have such a good way of just being so disarming and connecting with people. And when I watched the videos, I watched them before I responded to your first email to me, and I
Mm.
was like, I just want to talk to this guy. He seems so like nice, and I just felt instantly like comfortable and a camaraderie with you. So kudos to you, and thank you again for reaching out. Like, what an honor to be interviewed, and it's been amazing. So thank you.